Florida, 1977. The heat was suffocating, the highways endless, and the shadows on the roadside held more than snakes. That summer, a drifter named Danny Cross walked the back roads with nothing but a pack, a broken smile, and a hatchet. Some called him a hero, others a killer. But everyone who met him remembered one thing: the way he watched you, as if deciding whether you would live or die. Crawling from every corner of the world, come the stories that should never be told. Creepy stories from around the world. If you enjoy this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It truly helps us make more of this type of content.
You want to know how it started? I'll tell you. I was never meant to stay anywhere. I drifted through foster homes like smoke through a cracked window, slipping out before anybody could figure me out. Some of them tried, kind women who bought me shoes that fit, men who showed me how to throw a ball or fix a carburetor. But I already knew what they didn't. Attachments were traps. I never unpacked. I never trusted the sound of footsteps coming down the hall. By 15, I was gone for good. I hitched rides with truckers, day laborers, anyone who'd stop. Slept in barns, motels, sometimes the back seat of a car some fool forgot to lock. I ate when I could, stole when I couldn't, and I grew lean and hard on a diet of hunger and dust. It was in Tallahassee, one of those lean months, that I found it. Pawn shop window, $3.50. A hatchet, handle worn smooth. I didn't buy it because I needed it. I bought it because it felt right. Solid, dependable. A tool that could split wood or bone. I wrapped it in cloth that smelled of oil and rust. And from then on, it was mine. Always close. People saw me different ways. A waitress in Pensacola said I was polite, called her ma'am. A trucker swore I rode silent for 300 miles, staring out the window like I saw something he couldn't. But all of them, every one, remembered my eyes. Too steady, too old, like I'd seen something no one else wanted to, or like I was waiting for it to happen again. And I was. The summer of '77 pressed down on Florida like a fever. The nights buzzed with cicadas, the motels hummed with dying neon, and the highways filled with drifters like me. I walked those roads with my pack on my shoulder and the hatchet at my side. To most, I was invisible. To a few, unforgettable. Because every time I smiled, I was remembering something terrible. Every time I stuck out my thumb, fate answered. That's how I met Ed Slater. Old Chevrolet, paint the color of sand, engine groaning as it pulled up beside me near Live Oak. He asked where I was headed. I said west. He told me to climb in. He stank of sweat and tobacco. The seat cracked under me. He said not many my age were out there unless they were running from something. I turned and looked at him. Didn't say a word. I could tell what he was. Later, we picked up a girl on the roadside, Lisa. Young, sunburned, scarf in her hair. Said her car broke down. She climbed in next to me. She talked nervous, trying to fill the silence. Ed's smile got wider the more she spoke. Then it changed. His hand on her thigh. Her voice breaking. Her begging him to stop. And me, sitting there, hand on my pack. When I unwrapped the hatchet, the sound of the cloth peeling away was louder than her scream. I told him to let her go. He turned on me, and that was it. The first blow snapped his head sideways. The cab filled with the stink of iron and smoke. I swung again, and again, calm, measured, like I'd been waiting for it. When it was over, he was slumped against the wheel, twitching, drowning in his own blood. She ran from the truck sobbing. I just sat there breathing slow, the hatchet heavy in my hand, because it wasn't about her. It was about that moment, when chaos broke loose, when the world held its breath. That silence, it was mine. The deputies showed up later. She told them I saved her. They found him alive, barely, broken and bleeding. They called me a hero. The paper even said it. Drifter stops attack with hatchet. Woman saved. But people whispered. They said I didn't look scared, didn't look surprised. Like I'd been waiting. And they were right. I took the meals, the handshakes, the stares. Then I slipped away. Back to the road. Back to the silence. Florida stretched out in front of me. Swamps, motels, highways lit by dying neon. I moved through it all, listening, waiting. And I found myself wondering more and more, not if violence would come, but when. That's when I met Garrison. 63, retired lawyer, lonely man in a lonely house. Found me outside a store in Jacksonville. Offered me a bed. Said it was safer than the street. I followed him home. Sat at his table. Ate his food. Slept in his spare room with the hatchet by my side. He thought I was something broken he could fix. He was wrong. That night he reached out. Touched my arm. Told me I didn't have to run. Told me I was safe. Safe. Those words cracked something inside me. The first blow painted his books red. He begged. I answered with steel. Again. Again. Until there was nothing left to beg. When it was done, I wiped the blade on his shirt. Walked out into the night. The fan still spun, dogs still barked, cars still passed. Nobody knew a man lay cooling on the floor, kindness still written on his face. Nobody but me, and I carried the silence with me. You guys tell me you found him 2 days after I left.
A neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, noticed newspapers piling up on his porch. His lights, usually on by dusk, stayed dark. By the third morning, her worry outweighed her politeness. She knocked on his door, called his name. Silence. The only answer was the faint smell, sour, metallic, seeping into the Florida air. She called the police. 2 officers arrived just after noon. They forced the door, stepping into a home that was too still, too quiet. The air inside was hot and stifling, heavy with the stench of rot. The kitchen told the story first. A broken chair overturned, plates shattered on the floor, streaks of blood on the walls. And in the middle of it all, Richard Garrison lay sprawled in a dark pool that had seeped deep into the grout lines of the tile. The coroner's notes would later say blunt force trauma to the skull, multiple blows, unmistakably deliberate. The crime scene was chaos, blood spatter reaching the bookshelves, drag marks across the floor, yet nothing of value appeared stolen. Garrison's wallet lay untouched. His watch was still on his wrist. The violence wasn't for money. Detectives from Jacksonville's homicide unit descended quickly. They photographed every room, every smear. They bagged the broken chair, the shards of porcelain. But their attention kept circling back to one thing, the nature of the wounds. Too many blows, too precise, too practiced. This wasn't panic, Detective Robert Mallory muttered. This was purpose. Witness statements began to form a shape. Neighbors recalled a stranger staying with Garrison, young, thin, long hair, carrying a pack. They remembered seeing him arrive one evening, silent and watchful, following Garrison into the house like a shadow. At a diner a mile from the bungalow, a waitress told detectives about a drifter who matched the description. He sat alone, drank black coffee, paid in crumpled bills. She noticed the rag he kept at his side, folded tight, said she heard the faint scrape of metal when he shifted on the stool. Hatchet, she said. I swear it. The word passed among detectives like a spark. They found the old newspaper clipping from Lake City weeks earlier. Drifter stops attack with hatchet. Woman saved. The face in the grainy photo matched the description. Danny Cross. He had been a hero once. Now he was a killer. An all-points bulletin went out. Patrol cars scoured bus stations, truck stops, cheap motels along the highway. Deputies combed the wooded edges of town, wary of stumbling on a man who carried steel like an extra limb. But Danny was already gone. He had slipped back into the road, vanishing into the heat and dust like smoke on the wind. For weeks, sightings trickled in. A young man walking the shoulder near Baldwin, a drifter matching his build at a rest stop outside Stark. Always close enough to raise hope, never close enough to catch. And with each false lead, the whispers grew. He was out there, somewhere, watching the highways, waiting for another door to open. The Jacksonville Times ran the headline, "Killer Drifter Sought in Attorney's Death." For the first time, Danny Cross wasn't just a shadow on the road. He was a name, a warning, and the law was closing in. For months, Danny Cross was a ghost. The highways of Florida carried him like a current. Rest stops, truck beds, abandoned farmhouses, nights spent under bridges where the sound of water covered his breathing. Each sighting blurred into rumor, each lead dissolved before deputies arrived. But ghosts slip eventually. It was November 1977 when the break came. A Greyhound station in Ocala. Rain hammered the tin roof, running in silver sheets across the parking lot. Inside, a handful of passengers waited, shoulders hunched, clutching bags and tickets damp from the storm. The clerk noticed him first. A young man in a soaked denim jacket, boots caked with mud, hair long and dripping. He sat in the corner, silent, pack wedged against his leg. His eyes didn't wander like the others, they stayed fixed on the door, as if calculating escape routes. Something about him set her teeth on edge. She picked up the phone. When the deputies arrived, the station fell into a hush. Two men in tan uniforms, rain-slicking their hats, scanning faces. Danny didn't move. Not at first. He watched them approach, watched the hands hovering near holsters. Then he rose, slow and deliberate, his pack sliding off his shoulder with a heavy thud. "Daniel Cross," one deputy called, voice firm but uneasy. "Hands where we can see him." Danny's eyes flicked to the door, to the rain outside, to the path that might have carried him one more mile down the road. Then his hand went to the zipper of the pack. "Don't," the other deputy barked, gun clearing leather in a flash. But Danny pulled anyway. The rag came free. Steel gleamed under the fluorescent lights, dripping rainwater and memory. The hatchet. The room erupted. Shouts, passengers screaming, chairs scraping as people fled. Danny's arm rose once, not in a wild arc, but in that same calm, deliberate motion he had shown before, the motion of a man who had found his silence in the swing. A shot split the air. Then another. Glass shattered. The hatchet clanged to the tile. Danny staggered, eyes wide, not with fear, but with something colder. Disappointment, maybe, that the silence had ended too soon. He fell hard, blood blooming across his jacket, rain mixing with it in dark streaks. Deputies closed in, boots splashing, cuffs clamping onto wrists slick with red. Danny Cross was dragged from the station, rain beating down on his face, head lolled but eyes still open. Even as they pushed him into the cruiser, he didn't look defeated. He looked distant, watching something no one else could see. By dawn, the story was everywhere. Killer drifter caught in Ocala. The people who once whispered his name now shouted it. The hatchet had been bagged as evidence, but its shadow lingered. Danny Cross was no longer a ghost. He was flesh and blood, shackled and silent, headed for trial, and Florida held its breath. The trial of Daniel Cross opened in the spring of 1978, in a courthouse thick with heat and the smell of old wood polish. Reporters crammed into the gallery, their pens scratching like insects. Outside, a crowd pressed against the steps, curious onlookers, angry locals, and a few who had once whispered about the drifter with something like admiration. Now admiration had turned sour. The prosecution wasted no time. State Cross was painted in bold strokes. A dangerous transient, a man who thrived on chaos, who carried a weapon not for protection, but for pleasure. They showed photographs of Richard Garrison's bungalow, walls splashed in dark arcs, books stained beyond recognition, tiles cracked where blood had pooled. The jurors shifted in their seats, their faces stiff. "Ladies and gentlemen," Prosecutor Elaine Myers said, her voice sharp as glass, "this was not an act of panic. It was not self-defense. It was slaughter. Look at the number of strikes. Look at the precision. This man wasn't protecting himself. He was indulging himself." The defense told another story. They spoke of Danny's upbringing, abandoned, tossed between foster homes, hardened by a world that gave him nothing. They painted Richard Garrison not as a victim but as a predator, a man who lured in the vulnerable. Daniel Cross acted in fear, his lawyer argued, pacing before the jury. Fear of being cornered, fear of being used, fear of never escaping alive. He swung that hatchet because he believed it was the only way out. Witnesses lined the stand. Lisa, the young woman from the truck outside Lake City, testified first. She told the jury how Danny had saved her, how his hatchet had ended Ed Slater's attack. "He protected me," she said, her voice trembling. But when asked if she thought he enjoyed it, if there was something unnatural in his calm, she paused. Too long. The silence said more than her words. A neighbor from Jacksonville described seeing Danny with Garrison, quiet as a shadow, like he didn't belong there. A diner waitress recounted the rag at his side, the scrape of steel, the coldness in his eyes. "He gave me the creeps," she admitted, twisting her apron in her lap. Every word, every pause, weighed heavy in the courtroom. Danny sat through it all with the same unnerving stillness, shackled at the wrists, his hair trimmed, a clean shirt buttoned at the throat. But nothing in his posture suggested shame. His gaze flicked from face to face, unblinking, as though studying the jury like specimens. The public, once split between those who called him a hero and those who whispered he was cursed, now leaned toward one conclusion. The papers shifted tone. Headlines moved from "Drifter Hero Saves Woman" to "Hatchet Killer on Trial." On the 10th day, the prosecution brought the hatchet itself into court, cleaned, tagged, sealed in plastic. The jurors leaned forward as Myers lifted it carefully, letting the light catch on its blade. "This," she said, "is not the tool of a protector. This is the instrument of a predator." The defense objected. The judge overruled. The jury stared. By closing arguments, the courtroom buzzed with an electricity that felt more like dread than justice. "Daniel Cross is not a man who stumbled into violence," Myers told them. "He is a man who carries violence with him, waiting for the moment to release it, and Richard Garrison paid the price." The defense countered with pleas for mercy, for understanding, for the possibility that Danny was more victim than villain. But their words rang hollow in the heavy air. When the jury filed back in, their verdict came with brutal clarity: guilty of first-degree murder. Danny showed no reaction, no slump of the shoulders, no flicker of regret. He simply blinked once, slow, as though confirming something he had already known. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment, with no chance of parole for 50 years. The gavel struck, the crowd exhaled, and as deputies led him from the courtroom, Danny turned his head, his eyes sweeping across the gallery one last time. Reporters swore later that he smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just enough to say, "This isn't the end of me." For the public, the fascination curdled into fear. Danny Cross was no longer a drifter, no longer a savior or a mystery. He was the hatchet killer of Florida, a man whose story would be whispered for decades to come. If you enjoy this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It truly helps us make more of this type of content.